Okay, so I thought I would actually cover something a little bit different for someone who's new to C# programming or .NET programming, and I want to cover things that I struggled with when I first started. So, in other words, things that I thought were really confusing that a book didn't really explain early on, or a tutorial that I watched online didn't really explain early on. And one of the things that I used to wonder about is why is it that whenever somebody teaches C#, they're always usually teaching in a console application. So, in other words, people are always teaching C# in one of those, you know, blank, kind of black box console applications that, nobody really uses anymore, right here. Versus usually when you think of a program, you think of Windows, like this one that I'm using right here, or like, Firefox or something. You don't think of, a blank black, command prompt like this. Although if you're a programmer, you start getting used to command prompts. So let me show you something here. First, I'm going to actually just create this console application. Um, put like demo console, and it will be in my project folder. Okay. And I'm sure you've all seen this if you've ever learned how to program any, uh, like basic desktop application or desktop uh, programming language. Like if you use like C++, if you use Python, I mean, even JavaScript, you use the console in the browser. So I'm sure you guys have all seen when the console will pop up like this. When I run the program, we get a console that says, "What's up?" And then this is like the automatic press any key to continue thing that pops up. By the way, just so you know, this press any key to continue message may or may not pop up on your system. I know when I had Windows 7, I didn't get that, so I would have to actually add in console dot either read line or read key. You can do read key also, and then what that'll do is when I run the program now, it will stop until I enter a key. So it can be any key, but if I hit like enter or P or down arrow, what'll happen is that it would close the program out then. So that way it allows you to actually see what's going on. So in this case, it just says press any key to continue because by default, my system is set up to automatically say press any key to continue at the end of the application. So that way you don't just lose it. But if your system's not set up that way, like my old computer, then what would happen is as soon as you ran the program, if you didn't have read key in there, then it would just close. Like you wouldn't actually be able to see anything because it would just say what's up and then close real quick. So that's the reason why you might see people write console dot read line or read key at the very bottom of the application or at a certain point in the application when it's a console application for kind of no apparent reason otherwise. Um, so, anyways, the console is really, really simple and easy to understand. Like if you look at this program here, it's super basic. All it has is some of these using statements up here, which all using statements are is they're allowing you to access different aspects of somebody else's programming, somebody else's coding. And in this case, this is actually Microsoft's coding. So basically, this is the operating system up here. This is allowing you to do things that Windows allows. So, but aside from those using statements, you basically just have a really basic program here. I mean, there's everything has to be in a namespace, so it's in this namespace. Everything needs to be in a class, so you have this class called program, and then you just have this is called an entry point. And all an entry point is that's where when you run this program, that's where the program's going to actually start. So whatever is in this main right here, that's what's going to happen as soon as you open the program. So as soon as you double click on like the exec file or the program file or whatever, it's actually going to start with this right here. So this is the most basic program you could really get, and that's the reason why people who are teaching C# and other programming languages as well will start with just a console application, because it's super simple and it allows you to wrap your head around the programming concepts in kind of a vanilla or a really basic setting. So in other words, instead of screwing around and trying to figure out all these other advanced things that are going on, it's going to allow you to focus on just that thing that we're teaching. So let's say I'm trying to teach you this, console.writeline. What does that do? See, this is very clear what that does now, because in a console application, I could just hit Control F5, which starts the program, and it's like, okay, very obvious what that does. You know, it's easy to understand. I mean, without me even telling you what it does, if I were to tell you that when I run this program, this is what pops up. When you put this in here, you're going to figure out, okay, console.writeline writes to the console. And in fact, if I were to kind of close this out real quick, but if I were to do this, console.writeline again, and type in another line, and now run this, see, now it's really obvious what it does, because not only are you seeing that it writes something to the console, but you're also seeing that it writes everything I put in here in a given line, and then when you do another console write line, it writes it in its own separate line. So that's why it's called console write line, because every single time you do it, it's going to start a new line, and it's going to write whatever you put in there in here. So that's why we teach in the console window. Another good example is like an if statement. You know, so I could say something like this. So number is 5, and then if number is 5, console write line, the number is 5. So if I'm going to teach you about an if statement here, check this out. If I'm going to teach you about an if statement, it's going to be really easy to see what's going on, because now you know that console write line what's up just displays what's up in its own line on the console. You know console write line another line displays another line on the console. And now you can kind of get what's going on here, because I've set a variable to the number 5, and then I've said if that variable equals 5, which it does, then write another line on the console saying the number is 5, which is right here. Now, if that variable doesn't equal 5, it's not going to write it. So I'm going to close this out. Because you can't, by the way, you can't edit a program while it's running like that. So especially if you're debugging it. So anyways, so now the number is 6. See, it doesn't say the number is 5 anymore, because this if statement the condition has not been met. So since the number is not 5, and this says if the number is 5, well, it's no longer going to do this because the number is not 5. So anyway, so you got a little sneak peek at if statements there if you don't already know them. So, anyways, so the reason why people use the console is just because it's something that allows us to isolate concepts like the if statement or even like this console write line. And it allows us to isolate uh, programming concepts to teach them properly. So now I'm going to show you something. Check this out. Now I'm going to actually show you, because like the thing is the console is kind of boring. And that's one of the things I didn't like about it. So I'm going to start a Windows Forms application, which is just basically a Windows application in the traditional sense, where you're actually going to have Windows on the screen and everything. So as you can see here, we now have this window that we can work with. Okay. And the way this works is Microsoft actually gives you a visual designer to work with. So I'll give you an example. So what are some things that Windows have often? They have like a text box. So I can actually find on here text box, and I can drag it out here and drag it onto the window. So now I have a text box. And then let's say you want to have, an OK button. That's another common thing in a window. So I can go to the toolbox, which that's this thing right here. So this is the toolbox right here. And that's where you can drag these different items from. So now I have a button here, and I have a text box. Okay. And then I'm going to do one more thing. I'm going to actually create a label right here. I'm going to pull that out. And that's just literally like just a text entry. So like a lot of times you'll see labels near a text box. So like for example, if you go into this label here, you can change the text, and you could say text box. So a lot of times you'll see these paired together, and you can actually see here how this WinForms allows you to align these together even. So now you have a label that says text box. You have a text box, and you have a button. So instead, I'm actually going to create another label now. And I'm going to actually do something cool. I'm going to actually do something here with this. I'm going to say, whatever you enter into this text box here, when you click this button, that text is going to now change this label. Okay. So it seems like a really simple application, right? So what we need to do is we need to find out the name of this text box. Just text box 1. And we need to find out the name is label, which is label 2. And then another thing I want to do is I want to actually erase this text in this label, because we don't want the program to start with it saying label 2. We just want it to be nothing, basically. So in order for me to do this, we got to think about the actor here. What is causing the change? Well, the button click is causing the change. So we double click on the button. Okay. Now it's like, whoa, look at all this. Compared to that console application now, stuff's getting a little more complicated, because now we're seeing public partial class form1 : form. And we're seeing this thing here, initialize component. And now we're seeing private void button 1 click object sender event args e. So as you can see here, this starts to get a little bit more complicated. And what's going on here is actually considered an advanced C# concept called the event handler. And all that really is it's just saying it's when a user, or when a certain action happens in the program, it's going to do such and such. So when we click that button, it's going to run this function right here. And this is where we actually write the code that's going to say what happens. So we want to change the text in text box, or label 2 actually, to the text in text box 1. So upon clicking of that button, it's going to run this function. And when we're going to do this, we're going to say label 2 dot text equals text box 1 dot text. So you can see here that this function, this method, functions and methods are the same thing, basically. When button 1 is clicked, Soylent bar. When button 1 is clicked, it's going to say the label 2 text is going to change to whatever text is in text box 1. Cool. So when we run the program, test, click button 1, boom. See that? Now check this out. Elephant. Click button 1. Now it says elephant down there. And so this is label 2 area, and this is text box 1. Ape. Click button 1. Boom. So you can see we did make a simple program here. And it is, it's I think it's cooler than a console application because this is something everybody can relate to. Everybody uses Windows, and I don't mean Windows in the sense of Microsoft Windows. I mean everybody relates to computer interfaces like this with a maximize button, with a minimize button, be able to do this and drag this thing around. This is something that everybody understands how to use. Firefox is a window, Chrome is a window. Even in the Mac OS, you're working with Windows. So that brings me to a good point. I don't even know what, 'cause I'm not really an Apple guy, although I've used Apple computers a lot before. And I'm not sure what Apple calls their Windows, but I'm just going to call them Windows because this is basically what they do. So anyway, we can close that out right here. But the point is, in order for you to make a simple program in WinForms or Windows Forms, which is what this is, it requires a little bit more distracting things. Like in order to do what we just did, I had to go to this designer. I had to set up the design, and then I had to double click on one of the, on the button there and write my code in here. And if you're really, really new to programming or programming C#, you might not really understand what's going on here. You know what I mean? Like label 2 dot text equals text box 1 dot text. This is, to do a simple task, this requires a little bit more programming knowledge. And I mean, it really doesn't, but like there's more things in here for you to get confused by than if I were to just teach you this stuff with a console application. And that's the reason why most teachers will teach C# or other programming languages in the console for a while first, and then hopefully they eventually switch over to Windows, because otherwise, you kind of like, okay, cool, I know how to program, but I can't really use this because nobody really writes that many console applications anymore. And I mean, the truth is, programmers still use console applications, but I mean, for the most part, you're not going to be releasing console applications to the public unless you're like releasing them to other programmers or people who are learning programming. So Anyways, I want to describe that concept today as to why that is, because that's something I always wondered. Like, is why am I always working in this stupid black box all the time? Why is it that whenever I'm learning how to program C sharp or C++, I'm doing something like this, I'm having to interface with this console thing, rather than a window. And that's the reason why. So that's basically it. And if you do want to learn how to do, like, you can learn WinForms from the very get-go, and you could go on YouTube and you could look up, just type in WinForms application, and you can just start following along with people while they make their their Windows applications, and you'll be able to understand some things. Like, even though this was kind of complicated, like, this is not really rocket science. I mean, you can see here that what's going on is that when this button is clicked, it's running this code. So your mind can make the connection that what this is saying here is that when button one gets clicked, do this. And that's the same thing for everything in WinForm. So, like, let's say I wanna I'm gonna make something else here real quick. Like, let's say I have a radio button now, which is like one of those buttons you can select from. Okay. If I double click this radio button, okay, now when that radio button gets checked, it's going to run the code in here. So you can see how it says radio button one check change. So this is just the name of the radio button. So you can change that back in the code. You can actually, or back in the designer here, you could actually have changed that before we did that. But that's the key. You have to do that before we double click it, or else now if you change the name, it's not going to link up with this action right here, or this function right here, because it's gonna this function's waiting for when you click radio button one, and if this is no longer radio button one, now this isn't going to work. So you'd have to actually delete this, and you'd have to go. See, now it's all screwed up because I because the because I created that and the program is referring to it, and see, now it's like, oh my God, what is all this? Like, what is this stuff? And see, that's the reason why people don't teach you stuff using WinForms typically, because all this complicated stuff starts to happen and you don't really understand it. And see, now I can go back here and I can actually delete radio button one if I want. So anyways, that's all I got for today. I'm just trying to show you guys why we typically teach people stuff in a console application. But WinForms are not really that hard to understand. So if you really want to you could YouTube WinForms tutorials, and you could probably follow along. But you're going to be referring back and trying to learn basic things like if statements, while loops, data types, and all that kind of stuff. So anyway, I'm going to talk more about all that stuff in the future. But thanks for coming and watching this video, and I hope you guys have a great day.